The Central Bank of Nigeria has reduced the Cybersecurity Levy on electronic transactions from 0.5% to 0.005% in its new fiscal guidelines for 2024 to 2025. This is following the controversial introduction of the levy earlier in the year, which was met with criticism from Nigerians, subsequently suspended by President Bola Tinubu in May 2024. But in a new development, the Apex Bank said it will continue to enforce the payment of the mandatory levy of 0.005% on all electronic transactions by banks and other financial institutions by the Cybercrime, Prohibition, Prevention, etc. Act 2015. The levy, introduced under the Cybercrime, Prohibition, Prevention, etc. Act 2015, amended in 2024, is set to support the National Cybersecurity Fund, administered by the Office of the National Security Advisor. And now to discuss this, we're joined by Tech Analyst Temitayo Okuboyejo, and she joins me live. Thank you so much, Temitayo, for joining us. We appreciate you for doing this. I mean, once said, the president said, this administration said they were not going on with the cybersecurity levy. They scrapped it, and now they have reintroduced it back. How would the reintroduced cybersecurity levy impact the cost of electronic transactions for consumers and also businesses in Nigeria?
So I think the place to begin is the lack of clarity. So previously, when the cybersecurity levy was first introduced, the rationale for it was that other countries, and I remember specifically the other countries that the government cited as examples were Rwanda and Ghana. Now, interestingly, these two countries have a national cybersecurity strategy, and it is under the aegis of that strategy that cybersecurity levies were introduced. So, for example, anyone can go on Google and search Ghana's national cybersecurity strategy, and they would find the set of reasons, or a set of objectives for which the strategy is meant to achieve. Similarly, for Rwanda, we don't have the same thing in Nigeria. We don't know what our national cybersecurity strategy is. And the government, to use a street parlance, tested the microphone the last time, and now I've decided to reintroduce it. The reasoning for it, we don't know. I mean, I've gone and read all the opinion on articles I can find since the second announcement, and none of it specifies the objectives, what exactly the government is trying to achieve, other than to introduce another tax. So that's my starting point. Now, when we now move on to the business environment, you have a tax. It's supposedly very small, 0.005 or 0.05% of any transactions, and you begin to wonder how an addition, given the current business environment, given the current climate, additional taxation in the name of a levy gets added, increasing the cost of doing business, the cost of everyday transactions yet again. The only, so there are some exemptions, and those exemptions are very moot, to say the least.
Right.
Salaries are exempted. Payments for loans, so loan repayments are exempted. Mm-hmm. The cost of clearing a check, it's exempted from clearing a check. Mm-hmm. If you're transferring funds of your own within the same bank, they're exempted. So, for example, if I bank with Union Bank and I have a current account and a
Temitayo,
savings
your
account.
examples will cost you a check, or Temitayo, your examples will cost you a check. But we're pressed for time, right? So let's keep it moving as quickly because we're really pressed for time. But how would the central bank of, I mean, one of the problems that we have, especially when it comes to, government institutions, whether it's the executive itself or other MDAs, what we see is that there's never enough transparency, or Nigerians, there's this transparency or trust deficit. So how would the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, ensure that this collected levies, is, utilized effectively to enhance the security, cybersecurity infrastructure and protect, electronic transactions? Very quickly, because we're pressed for time.
So anyone who has those expectations from the central bank, has a, is a joker in my view. Has the central bank done that for stamp duties? Do you know what it's used for other than it's a charge on every transfer we make? Does anyone know what the central bank does with it? So any expectation that the central bank will provide some kind of clarity, in my opinion, is one that either reeks of ignorance or ignores how our government agencies tend to deal with policies. So I'm not expecting anyone to tell me or provide any transparency around what it will be used for. Banks, on their own, have to add the cost of security. The idea of securing customer funds is part of the cost of doing business, which banks would have had added to the cost of doing their businesses. I don't know why we have to pay for that. And in fact, it'd be interesting. It would be nice. It would be good to know if these costs that the CBN is charging, if some of these costs will be shared with banks to make securing our funds better. And then what does it mean for consumers? Does it mean that if I get, if I'm a victim of a fraud, the usual things that happens where somebody, you click a link or something, they take over your account and they transfer your money out. Is this levy some kind of insurance? Is this a way of ensuring that I get my money back?
Right.
What is it for?
Right. I mean, Temitayo, now that you're talking about, the consumers, one has to talk about financial inclusion, as particularly for the underserved populations that rely on electronic transactions, especially those that live in the border town, around, the perimeters of Nigeria. Let's put them in this conversation. How would the levy affect financial inclusion? Quickly, because we're out of time.
Okay, so again, from a government that considers itself a party that calls itself a progressive party, this is a regressive tax, because what it means is the same percentages apply to everybody, irrespective of income levels, irrespective of the size of transaction. So it would, the way it would affect someone who transfers 10,000 naira is exactly the same it would affect someone who transfers 100,000 naira. You have to make, if the final funds you need to transfer to someone is 100,000 naira, you have to account for that charge. So it's an additional tax, and it's regressive because it has no thresholds. It doesn't account for income. It doesn't take anything into account. It's just this flat percentage applied to everyone. People, as you said, in border towns, people who do not have access to banks, the unbanked communities. It means that these communities that would rely on POS, so it's an additional charge that POS operators would have to add when people process transactions with them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean,
so sorry, go ahead.
No, I wanted you to round up there with your final statement as we go, just your last sentence there.
So my final statement is that at this time, given the economic climate from a government that considers itself a progressive government, this is a disappointment. And aside from that, we have no clarity. We don't know what this money is supposed to be for. So it's just a question of the government using its powers. It's almost some kind of bullying, like we can use this power and we're going to do it anyway without any consultation, without any recourse to how people would feel about these things. Well, and what exactly it does for us, we don't know. So it's a huge shortcoming from the government. And I think we're now at a point where the government needs to begin to communicate to us better. They need to implement policies in a way that doesn't continue to erode an already, a government that already suffers from a huge amount of trust deficits.
Right.
So it just enlarges it.
Right. Well, Temitayo, many thanks for doing this with us. We appreciate you for coming on. Temitayo Okuboyejo, she is a tech analyst and joined us to discuss more on the reintroduction of the security levy. Once again, we appreciate you. Thank you.